Turid Sayer, together with her teenage sons Magne and Lauritz, return to the Norwegian city of Edda after many years of absence. At the entrance to the city, their car gets stuck behind an old man in an electric wheelchair who is trying to turn right. Magne gets out of the car to help, and the old man's wife approaches him. Looking into the guy's eyes, she smiles with satisfaction. He's a good boy, and then she touches his forehead. Magne's iris changes color for a moment, and then the guy feels something unusual in the perception of the world. He returns to the car and, trying to close the window, breaks off the window lifter handle. Stunned, Magne turns the thing in his hands and suddenly says that it's going to rain. Mother and brother laugh. There is not a cloud in the sky, and immediately the car is showered with a heavy rain. They continue on their way and get to their grandmother's old house. Lauritz is not happy that there is a shabby-looking trailer near the house, and Magne picks up an advertisement that calls for making the air of the city cleaner. The next morning, the guys go to school. Oddly enough, the brothers are assigned to the same class. The thing is, Magne is dyslexic, which is expressed by difficulties with word recognition and insufficient abilities in reading and writing. Magne's attention is immediately drawn to a pretty blonde, Gry, but Lauritz is ahead of him, and Magne has to sit in the back of the class next to Isolde, who is not popular at school. A lesson on the Scandinavian gods begins, and Magne learns that Edda is the last Norwegian city to convert to Christianity. It was here that Ragnarok took place, during which the gods died and the fate of the giants remained unknown. During lunch, Magne sits at Isolde's desk again and learns that she's on the side of the Greens and is fighting against the pollution of the world. She also introduces the guy to Fjord Utol as son of the owner of the Utol Industries factories, Fjord's sister Saxa, and their mother, the director of the school by the name of Ran. And then she talks about her blog on YouTube. At the end of the classes, the two leave school together, and then Isolde notices that one of the wheels in her bicycle is bent. Much to the girl's astonishment, Magne easily fixes the brake and returns the wheel to its original condition, which surprises him as well. In addition, he notices that his eyesight has begun to improve. The next day, he, Isolde, and Gry get a general assignment in sociology and begin to study democracy. Magne suggests studying the topic by using their town as an example. At this moment, he sees his mother, who has come to talk to the director. The women discuss boy's progress at school and recall the tragedy that happened many years ago when the boy's father died under mysterious circumstances. Later, the mother notices that Magne is not wearing any glasses and does not understand how this can be. But she's distracted by Vidar Utol's car. It turns out that she and Vidar have known each other for a long time. After returning home, Vidar tells his wife Ran about the meeting with the woman, while their children Fjord and Saxa discuss their appearance and whether it matches their age. Vidar gives them a task to follow Magne, who is currently engaged in repairs, and notices a rune carved on his father's tools. Later, the guy visits Isolde's page and looks through her materials about the strange death of the fish in the fjord. The next day, the girl invites him to her place and reminds him that he no longer needs glasses. While choosing water in the store, she explains to Magne that he can't drink tap water in Edda, and the store clerk suddenly warns the guy about the danger of the vernal equinox. In Isolde's house, the guy finds out that the history teacher, Erich, is the girl's father. At dinner, she invites him to go with her to the mountain as she monitors the speed at which the glacier is melting. They can go down by paragliding. The girl asks her father questions about her mother's death, but he keeps silent. Magne shares his memories of his father, and sweeping the girl's diary off the table, finds out that she has been hopelessly in love with Saxa for a long time. The next day, he tells his classmates about the upcoming hike in the mountains, while Fjord invites everyone to a party at his house. Returning home, Magne finds his mother repairing the fence, and his attention is drawn to his father's sledgehammer marked with the rune. The next day, Magne and Isolde go to the mountains. Soon they reach a blocked bridge, but Magne resolutely steps over the warning sign. Suddenly, the boy gets a text that his mother is unwell. He hurries to the city and Isolde goes on alone. Meanwhile, Vidar's car is driving along the mountain road. Stopping on the side of the road, Vidar goes outside, undresses, and starts hunting deer grazing on the mountain. With one blow, he kills the animal and rips out its heart. Meanwhile, Isolde reaches the glacier and sees her marks. She takes water samples and then notices the thawed entrance to the cave and photographs it. Once inside, she finds a door blocking the entrance to the depth of the cave. Standing over the fjord, Vidar eats the raw heart of the deer and emits a heart-rending cry, which frightens Isolde. Upon reaching home, Magne discovers that his mother is absolutely flying and, angry at his brother's stupid joke, goes outside. He sees Isolde paragliding down the mountain. Suddenly, the paraglider starts drifting towards electric wires. The guy hurries to the crash site and finds the girl's lifeless body. Vidar also arrives and tries to help her and then calls for an ambulance. But nothing can be done anymore. Returning home, Magne throws away his glasses and sees the sledgehammer. The distraught guy throws the hammer and it disappears into the clouds, which are instantly covered with lightning. After everything that happened, Magne is taking the death of her friend hard and decides never to wear glasses again. The classmates ask a lot of questions about the girl's death, but he can't say anything definite. He enters the classroom and sits down at the desk whose second half is covered with flowers and burning candles. Ren makes an announcement that there will be no history class today, but suddenly Isolde's father enters the classroom. He cannot stay at home alone. The man asks the school not to cancel the vernal equinox holiday because Isolde would be against such a decision. Later, the police announce that the girl's death was caused by a thunderstorm strike to the dome of the paraglider. But Magne objects. Everything happened before his eyes, and there was no thunderstorm at that time. Nevertheless, the case is being closed. On the same day, Vidar asks Stuart to get the insurance money for his car, which was smashed by some madman. And he sends the woman photos in which Stuart recognizes the sledgehammer. She hurries home to ask Magne questions, but he himself is shocked by such an accusation. The guy calculates how far he threw the hammer, 1,537 meters. But this is impossible. Magne buys a new sledgehammer and throws it in a deserted place late at night. And then he calculates the distance, 541 meters, which is several times higher than the world's record to a hammer throwing. Meanwhile, Vidar examines the sledgehammer while Ran speaks about the experiences of the school children who sincerely mourn the dead girl. And then the husband suddenly admits that he killed Isolde because she found the entrance to the cave. The woman gets angry. They agreed not to touch the children, but since it happened, they need to find Isolde's lost phone. At school, Gry and Magne continue to work on the project together and listen to a warning not to blame the destruction of the planet only on the rich. Later at home, sorting out his mother's things, Lauritz finds an old blouse. Magne invites Gry to work at his house, which leads to a heartfelt conversation about Magne's past. Meanwhile, Turid notices Erich in the store looking lost. She expresses sympathy and the man is grateful to her for it. Lauritz finds Magne watching the weather forecast. Magne insists that there was no thunderstorm the day Isolde died, and then he admits that it was he who threw the sledgehammer into Vido's car, but his brother doesn't believe it. The celebration of the vernal equinox begins at school. The classmates show Saxa a photo of an improvised altar at the site of Isolde's death. While Vidar inspects this area in search of the girl's phone, he notices that Magne is visiting the place too. At school, everyone is shocked by the sight of Lauritz, who came to the evening in his mother's blouse and with makeup. The headmistress opens the evening and offers a moment of silence for Isolde. Saxa sings a song about her native land, which is interrupted by the appearance of Magne. Later, Lauritz advises his brother to forget about Gry because Fjord is already hitting on her. Later, Lauritz starts hitting on Yakutu. Then the headmistress takes the two boys away. Magne sits down with Gry, but Fjord invites the girl to a dance, and the guy has nothing to do but sit and watch. Watching them, he crushes the bottle in his hand and it shatters into small pieces. He goes to the men's room where he meets Oscar, whose mother is a police officer, and he blurts out that the girl died from hitting a rock. At this time, hot dancing begins in the hall, and Magne sees the headmistress surrounded by boys. Fjord puts on his music and he and Saxa begin a strange sensual dance to which Lauritz joins. The three of them squirm on the dance floor much to the delight and astonishment of the crowd. Magne goes to Isolde's father's house and informs him about the change in the cause of his daughter's death. He's sure that the police are lying, but the inconsolable father asks to not disturb the peace of his dead daughter. Out of anger, Magne easily moves the multi-ton car in front of the house, which terrifies Erich. At this time, Fjord, Lauritz, and Oscar are going to the altar, and younger Utul, ridiculing people's stupid beliefs, urinates on the burning candles. Oscar manages to record this and upload everything to the internet. Fjord orders the video to be deleted, but it has already gone online. Magne is reviewing numerous notes about violations of environmental regulations by Utul Industries, which Erich shows him, and he throws away the girl's diary because she has the right to personal secrets. And at Utul's house, the owner is feeding his dog when Ren shows him a scandalous photo from the altar. The husband promises to deal with this issue. Sex is trying to find out at least something new about Magne from Gry, who stayed overnight at their house, but she does not know anything. She goes to the bathroom and witnesses Vidar beating his son. The man is furious. People worship them too and sacrifice to them. Therefore his son insulted him with his act too. Frightened, Gry hurries to take refuge in Sax's room. The next day, Isolde's funeral takes place and everyone goes to church, but returning home, the Sayer family finds their home trashed. The brothers go to the homeless neighbor, accusing him of stealing from their house. He admits that he has been in the apartment, but only after another man who arrived there in a big black car accompanied by a dog. The brothers realize that it is Vidar but do not understand why he needed it. Later, Magne goes to see a therapist. He feels that everything has changed around him but does not find an explanation for this. He talks about the robbery and accuses the police of inaction, and the therapist tells Ren about the session. Back home, Magne tells his mother about the conversation with the neighbor and blames Vidar, but Turet says that it's absurd and does not want to hear anything about it, especially since Erich has arrived. He hands Isolde's laptop to Magne because his computer is already failing. The guy searches the computer and finds data on changes in natural conditions in the vicinity of Edda. The same evening, Ren tells her husband about the therapy session. She is furious. Not only did Vidar break into Magne's house, but the guy's neighbor saw him, and now everyone can find out about this inexplicable case. The next day, Gry confesses to Fjord that she saw the beating, and it shocked her. But he changes the topic of the conversation. The girl agrees to ride with him, but Lauritz and Saxa are also in the car. Meanwhile, Magne is talking to a police representative again. He knows for sure that there was no wind that day, but the woman objects. He said that he got to the city in half an hour and no one can do that. The young people are driving along a mountain road and Fjord puts on a song in the ancient Icelandic language, which is surprising to Gry. Suddenly, a bird breaks against the windshield of the car. Saxa and Fjord come out to look at it. The sister reminds them of the need to learn at least something about Magne and eats the bird. Puzzled by the officer's words, Magne goes to a deserted warehouse and starts jogging to see how fast he runs. He does a 100-meter dash in just 7 seconds. Meanwhile, Erich is given Isolde's jacket, which has traces of blood on it, and Vidar follows Magne and witnesses an accident in which the guy is hit by a snowplow. He joyfully announces to the family about Magne's death, who interfered with their affairs. Then Vidar confesses to the children that he killed Isolde because she found dangerous things hidden by them in the glacier. Ren reminds them of the danger they are exposed to by getting close to mortals. Meanwhile, the doctors at the hospital are perplexed. The guy who was hit by the snowplow has no injuries at all. Magne goes home, and he doesn't know that at this very moment the body of his deceased neighbor, who was a witness to the robbery of their house, was being brought to the morgue. At home, Turid thanks the gods for saving her child's life, and Magne makes another note: he is now also invulnerable. His sight and sense of smell also have improved. The next day, during the lesson, there is a skirmish when Magne blames the Utul plants for the emissions of harmful substances which caused the inhabitants of the fjord to die. Saxa resolutely defends her father. After the lesson, Magne asks the teacher to test the dried blood from Isolde's jacket. He is sure that there's someone else's blood on the clothes. At least they smell different. The woman is surprised by his sense of smell and agrees to run the test. Later, Gry asks him questions about the incident. He shows her the jacket and asks her to smell it, but the girl does not detect the difference at all. In the afternoon, a group of classmates goes to a cafe where Oscar breaks the news about Ran's behavior the previous evening, which he learned about from his friends. Saxa is outraged by the silly rumors and stirs the conversation towards Gry, who is still a virgin. This pisses Gry off, and she goes home where she finds her father in front of a can of beer. The man is upset. The insurance company refused to pay him money for his sick lungs. No one sees the connection between the disease and the emissions from the U2 factories. Meanwhile, Vidar is raging in his house. No mortal could have survived. Who is this guy? To which Ran promises to find out everything very soon, since in the evening the brothers will come to them for dinner. Magne and Lauritz go to the U2 house, unaware that they are the only guests of the evening. They are seated at a chic table and are treated to alcoholic drinks. The hosts do not skimp on the drinks. Vidar pours Magne mead, the drink of the ancient gods. Feeling intoxicated, Magne begins to behave inappropriately, and throwing an axe at the target hanging on the wall simply breaks it. And then he confides in Ren about his new strength. The woman is surprised and offers to fight with her hands. The guy promises to defeat her and holds out his hand. They begin to fight, and Magne realizes that he cannot defeat the fragile-looking woman. They fight without restraining themselves, and at some point he suddenly sees the true appearance of an ancient monster hiding behind the guise of the beauty. At this moment the table breaks down. Jumping up from behind the wreckage, Magne sees the woman in front of him again. He goes to the bathroom and after washing his face, looks up at the mirror and suddenly sees the face of an ancient warrior staring back at him. Coming up next, a recap of the following episodes. Choi, a young promising guy, goes for an interview at a large corporation. On the way, he contacts his fiancée, who wishes him good luck. And then, suddenly, right before his eyes, a man crossing the street gets hit by a car and flies right under Choi's feet. The guy tries to help him, but the poor man dies in Choi's arms. This shocks Choi so much that he can't even answer basic questions during the interview, and naturally, he's turned down for the job. He spends the next 7 years searching for work, working as a laborer, waiter, and taxi driver to pay off his debts while his friends gain experience and create families. He sends out thousands of resumes, goes to interviews, and believes he'll find a good job. But time passes, and nothing changes. One day, he goes for an interview at the same corporation as 7 years ago. After reading his resume, listing various odd jobs, the manager notes the guy's persistence, numerous certificates, and licenses he's obtained. Choi leaves the interview hopeful, but then he's told that his investments have completely burned down. In a fit of despair, he rushes to the investor to confront him and ends up breaking his doors. The neighbors call the police, but it's too late. Choi voluntarily handed his money to a scammer. Distraught, he walks to his fiancée's house and sees her being dropped off by a man in a luxurious car. She notices Choi and offers him money for the time being. Upset, Choi asks his fiancée to forget him, as she shouldn't tie her life to such a failure, and he goes home. He finds all his belongings at the doorstep, as the apartment owner evicted him for non-payment. In the morning, he receives a message rejecting him from the job at the corporation. This finally drives Choi insane. He climbs to the rooftop, realizing that his life went awry on the day the man hit by the car died in his arms. Choi is no longer afraid of death. He takes his step forward and falls, and on the ledge, his phone rings, displaying his mother's name. Choi regains consciousness and darkness. Confused, he removes the blindfold and finds himself in a chair inside an airplane. An unknown face is displayed in the monitor. Suddenly, a girl appears, reading his last note. She announces that he's dead, but strongly disagrees that death is a way to end the pain. She transports Choi to a place where she intends to show him real suffering. They find themselves on a tall tower, with cries coming from below. She is the goddess of death and intends to punish him for insulting death. With those words, the girl throws Choi down and he falls into a horde of horrifying creatures in a sea of blood. He screams, fights off monsters, and he's back in the airplane cabin, facing the goddess of death. Choi learns that as punishment, he must die 12 times in different people's bodies. If he wants to avoid hell, he must try to survive in at least one of the given lives. Choi tries to object, but death disappears. The plane's engine starts shaking, and a terrified Choi puts on a life jacket, despite the flight attendant explaining that it's just turbulence. Soon, everything stabilizes. Choi looks around the plane's cabin and marvels at the expensive items. Then, an unfamiliar glowing object appears before him, containing memories and skills of the person whose body he now inhabits. Choi finds himself in the body of the second son of the owner of the corporation, where he was so eager to get a job. The guy realizes he can continue his life with all this wealth and agrees to live on. However, the plane's engine explodes. Choi manages to reach his seat and fastens his seatbelt as the flight attendant is carried away into a gap. The plane explodes and Choi dies in the flames. But immediately he's reborn in a vast dark space, facing a glowing door leading to hell. Death sits at a table, loading a gun with bullets that will kill him each time, allowing him to transfer to another body. The glowing stone he saw will provide him with memories and abilities of the person whose body he enters. Choi doesn't understand the rules of this game. How can he survive if all the other deaths are just as inexorable? But Death believes it's his problem now. If he doesn't survive, he'll end up in the hell she intends to show him. Choi sees a burning space filled with cries and pain, and cries himself for not understanding his guilt. And then Death confesses his guilt is that he arrived at death before she came to him, but he still has a chance not to go to hell. Death shoots, and Choi finds himself falling from a great height as a man. At first he pleads for help, but then the glowing stone appears, and Choi realizes his new body is that of an extreme sportsman, agreed to make a parachuteless jump into a specially made net, televised worldwide. If he succeeds, the sponsor will pay him a huge sum. The glowing object penetrates Choi, and endows him with the abilities of an athlete. The guy is confident that he can do it all. However, he crashes right in front of the net, shocking viewers worldwide. Choi finds himself on the brink of hell once again. He's outraged. He didn't have the slightest chance to survive. Then the guy starts recounting that he was born into a poor family, couldn't find a job, and lost his fiancée. He had nothing to hold on to. Death mocks his enumerated problems and shoots him in the head. Choi finds himself in the body of a teenager this time. He then sees one of his classmates watching a video of the crashed athlete and laughing at his death. A glowing stone appears, and Choi learns that he lives with his mother because his father died. The woman works hard to support her son, but he hates school because the class leader bullies him, and one day, after another beating, he decided to jump from the roof, and that's when Choi enters his body. Choi realizes that if he survives, he won't go to hell and can start over, but the class leader immediately reminds him to bring him some milk. He needs some milk! An indignant Choi grabs a chair and attacks the leader to teach him a lesson, but the leader's friends come to his aid. One of them, a tall, strong guy, beats up Choi, and no one comes to his rescue. During classes, Choi reflects on his situation and concludes that he first needs to gain the support of the strong guy. He returns home and, looking at the poor apartments, remembers his mother. He also grew up in poverty with a single mother, who is now completely alone. Having dinner with another mother, he sees his own and cries from the pain of loss. In the evening, he receives a message demanding money from the class leader, who constantly bullies Choi. The next day, Choi meets with the strong guy, and he explains that the class leader is friends with the strongest 11th grader, and he allows his henchmen to do whatever they want. During lunch, the leader again bullies Choi, and in front of the whole school, Choi pours noodles over his head. Shocked by such audacity, the leader orders the strong guy to catch Choi, but he suddenly refuses because he doesn't want to miss lunch. Realizing that no one is going to protect the leader, the others laugh at the now former leader. The strong guy remembers how Choi asked him not to interfere with what's about to happen. The former leader rushes to the 11th grader, who leads his gang to settle the matter. But upon seeing who his help was needed against, he's puzzled. Can't a schoolboy handle a little classmate on his own? Then why is he in his gang? The embarrassed former leader tries to attack Choi, but the strong guy steps in. The power of the foolish schoolboy has come to an end, and even his girlfriend prefers someone else now. Choi starts running to get stronger because he needs to be strong, and then one evening, the former leader attacks him and kills him with a stone. Choi wakes up again on the brink of hell. He gets shot in the forehead and is reborn in a new body. He finds himself tied to a chair with a sack over his head. They torture him with water and then remove the bag, demanding to know where the girl and the money are. And when a hammer is raised above him, a glowing stone appears. Choi learns that he's in the body of a hitman. He once fell in love with the boss's girl, who asked him to help her escape. He hid the girl and the 10 billion won he stole from the boss and put in a secure place, but he got caught by the boss, and now the guy breaks free and attacks the thugs himself. He manages to turn off the lights and defeat the gang. Choi decides to find the stolen money, which he will use to start a new life. He opens the door and finds himself in a moving truck. Choi gets out on a motorcycle while the chase ensues. They corner him on a bridge, where he uses all of his skills to escape, causing a massive accident. Choi races through the night city on his motorcycle, but the pursuit doesn't let up. Then he enters a shopping mall, jumps into an elevator, and closes the doors before the pursuers can reach him. And when they finally catch up with him on the roof, he jumps straight into a pool. The boss orders to find the lucky guy. And he arrives at the pier, where a girl rushes into his arms, and when he tells her that the money is in the boat with lanterns, she shoots him. Choi finds himself at the gates of hell with a laughing death. But Choi is not so simple, because he didn't reveal the exact location of the money. In the next life, he hopes to find it. The guy dies and ends up in a prison cell. His friends warn him to behave well, or the murderer, a psychopath, will finish him off just 4 days before his release. Then, the psychopath enters this cell, and Choi recognizes him as the class leader who bullied classmates. Unable to contain himself, Choi attacks him. Other inmates drag him away, and then a glowing stone appears. Choi's new body is that of a guy who dreamed of becoming an MMA fighter, but his mother got into debt, and the guy agreed to commit a crime for someone else's money. The fighter was still a minor, so he got a suspended sentence for running over a pedestrian. However, during the trial, the victim died, and the guy received a real 2-year sentence. When the real culprit's lawyer came to him, the fighter threatened to expose him and demanded more money, and now Choi is trying to get the schoolboy to admit that he's not a scary psycho murderer, but a pathetic teenage killer. The inmates, outraged by such lies, beat up the murderer. One day, during work in the workshop, a tragic accident occurs. While the guards take away the injured, the others arm themselves and, stating that Choi won't leave the prison alive, attack him. But the future champion of MMA scatters the attackers. At night, he catches the schoolboy making a shank, and to punish him, he pretends to see dead people, and now the victim of the schoolboy is standing behind him, saying that he will forever haunt his killer. The former, very gullible class leader experiences a mental breakdown. The day of release arrives. Choi meets the lawyer of the real culprit, who brings him additional money, but suddenly the guy refuses them because he intends to live honestly from now on. Later, he goes to the pier and finds the 10 billion won hidden by his past self. He brings them to a rented apartment and makes plans for the future. At night, he dreams of his mother and wakes up in tears. And then, he receives a call from the mother of his new body. Choi promises to come. He divides the money into 2 parts, preparing one for the new mother, and hides the other in a storage room at the station. Choi goes to the area where the fighter lived. He is attacked by a man with a knife, and Choi doesn't understand who wounded him. The man reminds him that he ran over his daughter with a car. The guy apologizes and confesses that another person committed the hit and run, and he took the blame for the money. The perplexed man stops when footsteps are heard and flees. It turns out that Choi's prison buddy caught up with him, but suddenly he confesses that he went to prison to kill the fighter and is now glad to have found him first because there is a reward for his head. The guy stabs Choi, who dies, regretting the money, and the phone rings, displaying the name of the mother. Choi finds himself before death again, but this time he cries, remembering his mother. Death is disappointed with his new failure, and he asks to be shot. In the next life, he finds himself in the body of a young guy, not far from the train station. Choi runs to the storage room and manages to retrieve the bag with the money at the very last moment. Then he sees a guy on a poster, and the appearing stone informs that the guy works as a model. Choi goes home and admires the expensive furniture. Then a call comes in, and a friend of the model reminds him of a party. Choi goes goes to the party and realizes that he can't handle alcohol because he gets drunk quick. Suddenly, the CEO of the corporation where he tried to get a job several times at appears, and Choi tries to get to know him, but then he completely indulges in the fun. He wakes up when his older brother wakes him up. It turns out they have a whole cafe to take care of, and when his brother leaves, Choi has to take responsibility for it, and on this day, he needs to work as a waiter. And then, at the cafe, enters his fiancée from his previous life, Ji-sil. The guy is completely speechless. He remembers how they met when the girl lost several pages of her first book, and he picked them up, and how he suggested they break up because he considered himself unworthy of her. And now, a new meeting. Choi's brother, noticing his awkwardness, informs him that the girl is a famous writer. Choi immediately Googles and learns that the girl's novel recently won a contest. It was dedicated to her favorite guy. Choi remembers the night before he jumped from the roof. Apparently, in that envelope was her prize money. Upset, the guy leaves to find the girl's book. As he reads it, he realizes that it was based on their shared experiences and events. He told her that no one would cherish her more than he did, and he promised never to let her go. Now, in the cafe, he remembers that he promised to give her a fountain pen after the publication of her book because, according to her, every true writer should have one. That evening, he secretly bought the pen and asked for it to be engraved, but he never gave it to her. Then, the man who he saw in front of her house that day approaches Ji-sil, but now he is with his family and calls the girl his sister. Choi realizes his mistake. The next day, he meets the girl with her favorite tea and asks for permission to tell her the idea of a new book. He tells the story of a person experiencing a series of deaths. The girl is amazed because he narrates everything so realistically. She asks for the hero's name, but instead, Choi asks for her autograph, and suddenly he sees the same pen in the girl's hands, which, it turns out, was given to her by Choi's mother. From that day on, he meets with her daily and told her what his supposed hero was going through. The girl was astonished because everything sounded so realistic, as if he were talking about a real person. One day, he gave the girl a red umbrella because it was raining outside. He returned to the cafe, where a waitress broke a glass, and he helped her clean up the shards and cut his hand. Then, police sirens sounded in the distance, and the girls who entered the cafe began talking about the accident victim. Choi rushed to the scene of the tragedy and saw the broken red umbrella. He started shouting when he saw Ji-sil standing across the street. The girl saw all of this and stayed to bandage his hand and talk. She understood that the guy was scared for someone dear. After all, she behaved the same way when she learned about her beloved's death. As a farewell, she says that she won't come anymore because his stories reminded her of her loss. Later, she goes to Choi's burial place and cries in front of his photograph, and Choi himself watches this from the sidelines. After waiting for the girl to leave, he approaches the shelf with urns, where Choi's mother finds him. He hears her crying and cries himself, trying to beg for forgiveness. Later, he writes a letter to Choi's mother, supposedly from Choi's friend, and puts it in the bag with the money, then gives it to the woman. The next day, he meets Ji-sil and tells her the continuation of his story. She finds it amazing, and she allows him to accompany her home. On the way, she hopes that his story will end well because she feels sorry for the main character. He remembers how once she introduced him to her colleagues, not caring that he was a waiter, as she considered him hardworking and handsome. She meant everything to him, but he never told her that. He thought she would cope with his death, and now he wants to apologize for not understanding her properly and admits that he will only ever love her. He blames himself for not realizing that there are people around who will cry and laugh with him in moments of disappointment and joy. He understands that nothing can be changed, but everything he told her happened to him. He got into this body by the will of the goddess of death, and he calls himself by his real name, Choi. But then, a car runs into them. With fading eyesight, he sees the director of the same corporation stepping out of the car, who is upset, with a broken bumper, and he remembers that in their lives, he had encountered this man more than once. It was he who was responsible for the airplane crash, eliminating his brother as a competitor in that way, and for running over the girl, and now he calmly kills Choi. Later, the police and doctors remove the consequences of the accident, and Choi comes to his senses on the brink of hell and promises to himself to destroy this scoundrel. And then, He grabs a gun and shoots the goddess of death. An amazing idea, excellent special effects, and a very deep meaning. And not in vain, according to many film critics, this series has become a real breakthrough in Korean cinema. Friends, I highly recommend watching it. At the moment, only 4 episodes have been released, and I'm eagerly awaiting the continuation. The day comes when scientists in one of the biotechnology laboratories begin to clone famous personalities for very large fees, of course. In fact, many rich people would like to have a child of a genius like Vivaldi, Galileo, or Michelangelo. Soon, however, people decide to take a swing at something far more valuable: God himself. After Lucifer rebelled against the power of God in heaven, he was defeated by the archangel Michael, and flaming meteor was thrown into the underworld, where he had to remain in chains and punishing flames. Michael himself chained him to a rock and cried out to return as a humble angel, to which Lucifer replied that he would rather reign in hell than serve in paradise, and he threatened that he would return as ruler of the world. Over time, Lucifer was joined by numerous demons as he craved revenge. Meanwhile, on earth, Lucifer's disciples set up a temple at the site of his fall into the abyss, and they believe that one day he will return to rule on earth. Our time. Laura Milton, an American student, is trying to persuade her professor to accept her thesis on the theme that there are no evil or good spirits, but he refuses, offering to discuss the subject in an intimate setting. But now the girl refuses. At the same time, a rare exhibition begins at the museum, the Shroud of Turin, which contains the DNA of Jesus and is a record of the fact of his resurrection. Everything is on display. Laura enters the museum after receiving a pass, a badge from a priest she knows. Marconi explains that Christ was wrapped in the shroud the day he died, but that when he rose from the dead, his body shone so brightly that his imprint remained on the cloth. Thus, the shroud is a picture of Jesus. The priest then escorts Laura to the statue of the Archangel Michael, who has been brought to the museum to guard the shroud. The War of the Angels was the first war and the first evil, but Laura disagrees. Evil is not an external mystical force, it is a personality, and when trouble happens to loved ones, it is foolish to blame the devil. But Marconi is sure that only Michael stands between the devil and men. There are many prophecies that Lucifer will return, but the father hopes that he will not find a way out. The priest leaves to go about his business, and Laura gets comfortable and begins to draw. Suddenly, she hears her name, but no one is around. She calms down and continues to work. It's evening and the gallery is about to close. The last group of tourists enters the museum, and while the guard is distracted for a moment, a figure in a black cloak separates from the group and makes his way through a side door. Despite the late hour, Laura is still working when she thinks Lucifer's head on the statue is moving, followed by the cry of a raven. The girl walks to the window without noticing the sinister figure behind her, who pulls a sword from Michael's hand and walks away. Laura closes the window and gathers her things. The guard is ready to escort her out, but she refuses. She still has to see Padre Marconi. She goes to the chapel and sees a figure in black slaying the guard with a sword. The girl runs away in terror and hides in the confessional, watching as the woman with the sword breaks the glass over the shroud. Padre Marconi arrives at the noise and, in the name of Saint Michael, demands that the sacrilege cease, but the woman throws him aside and pierces him with her sword. Laura moves carelessly and the villain notices her. She orders her underlings to take the shroud and the girl, hoping that he might like her. The bandits leave while the mortally wounded priest summons the Archangel Michael to occupy his body and defeat his enemies. Immediately, a luminous whirlwind descends from the heavens and the father comes to life. He tries to catch up with the villains, but they drive away. The plot is moved to a private auction where one of the scientists, Dr. Laurent, explains that he has managed to create a procedure by which he can grow babies from the DNA of great men, thus resurrecting the most prominent figures in the history of mankind. And as proof, he presents the reincarnation of the great Vivaldi and his proud parents. The next lot, he presents the new Michelangelo Buonarroti, and the whole rises in a burst of delight. The bidding begins when a woman in black appears in the gallery and beckons to the doctor. He rushes to her call. The pair travel to the Devil's Castle, where the doctor sees the shroud. At last, Lucifer will have a decent home. Meanwhile, Laura is dragged into some room where several girls are already sitting in chains. All of them are horrified by what is happening and do not understand why they are there. A few men enter, take a blood test and photograph Laura, while Father Marconi, or rather the Archangel Michael in his body, makes his way to the guard room where two monks are watching the murder videos. Seeing the one who was murdered in front of them alive, they are astonished as he finds out where the keepers of the shroud were and how could they have allowed this to happen. It is explained to him that the cardinal responsible for everything is not himself at the moment. He sees secret cults and the devil's minions. And now he is in the asylum of Saint Michael. Archangel takes the car keys and drives to the cardinal's house, while the doctor isolates DNA from the blood traces on the shroud. The old cardinal meets Michael with a gun and upon learning of what has happened becomes enraged. He warned them, but looking into the man's eyes he realizes he is not Marconi. The cardinal shows Michael Lucifer's castle and suggests that his minions intend to revive him. He reminds him the scriptures say that one day the devil will be freed from his chains and will rise from the underworld. Apparently the time has come. Two monsters are responsible for his release, a woman and an underground monster, but only Michael himself or God can set Lucifer free. The devil's minions have offered him the bodies of virgins for centuries to get a vessel for the devil, but human bodies are too weak. Although there was one woman in history who was able to bear and give birth to a son of God, and today science is ready to open the gates to the devil using Christ's DNA. Michael asks to be taken to the castle. Meanwhile, the girls try to devise an escape plan and share their experiences. It turns out that Laura's husband and son are dead. Instruments inform the doctor of a successful DNA extraction, and the walls in the underworld begin to crumble, heralding the devil's release, while the doctor informs Liz of a complete match of all the right parameters with Laura's body, and the women wait for the attendants to arrive and pounce on them. It seems that they will succeed, but another group rushes to the rescue and the girls are dragged into the laboratory. They are laid on tables and despite desperate resistance, fertilized eggs are injected into their bodies. Liz convinces Laura to put up with it, for Lucifer is bound to like her. In the meantime, Cardinal escorts Michael to the entrance to the dungeon and warns of caution. A monster awaits ahead. At this time, the devil's minions gather in the hall with the well. Two impregnated girls are tied to a pillar in the center, and the monster who has come out takes them and leads them to the gateway to the underworld. The girls are put in an iron cage and lowered down, while Lucifer is already waiting for them. Sensing the approach of the possible Holy Mothers, he removes their collars and, transformed into a luminous stream, rushes towards them. The women are seized by the subterranean monsters and the stream enters one of them, but her body fails and she dies. Then the glowing worm enters Laura's body. Liz and the servants greet the living woman with delight. The choice is made. She is escorted into a glass cage where it is explained that her child will be the new Jesus. Meanwhile, Michael sneaks inside the castle and, having obtained a guard's uniform, finds the shroud and tries to find Laura. The doctor enters, but Michael rejects him and sets fire to the laboratory. He finds Laura, but the woman realizes it is not her longtime friend. She runs away. The Archangel has to run after her. He manages to drag her into a storage room where he explains who he is and finds out exactly what was being done to the woman. The couple escapes when Liz is informed that the shroud is missing. She gives an order to detain Laura at all costs, and the guards rush in after her. Laura and Michael in the meantime try to hide from the underground monster in narrow passages, but it catches up with them and attacks the Archangel. And while he wages a hard fight, Laura is grabbed by the guards. The enraged woman threatens Liz to kill herself and the child, and she orders her to be taken to a cell. Meanwhile, Michael is captured and put on a chain in the dungeon while Laura is tied to a bed. Liz is willing to do anything to keep the baby. After gathering all his strength, Michael breaks the chains and frees himself, while the castle guards search for the shroud hidden in the dungeon. The monster manages to see the Archangel descend into the underworld. After reaching the bottom, he's attacked by the imprisoned souls and discovers that Lucifer has been freed and his sword is missing. Then the demon of greed, Mammon, flies to him and announces that they will soon close the gate and Michael will remain here instead of Lucifer, and he scoffs at his foolishness to come down in a mortal body. The Archangel is chained to the rock with Lucifer's sword. Laura meanwhile sees her child in an ultrasound, and he suddenly calls out her name. The woman wakes up terrified and sees Liz nearby, who finds out what Lucifer told her, and then tells the story of a brave warrior and a tyrant who were equals. But the tyrant wanted the warrior to be his slave, but he refused. and soon he would rise up and join the fight. Laura speaks unflatteringly of the demon, for which she is slapped in the face, after which Liz explains the transformation happening to her body by the need to make it comfortable for the divine child. But the woman doesn't want to accept her imposed role as the mother of an incomprehensible creature. Meanwhile, the people who were given to Lucifer come to Michael, pronouncing the oath, "Saved one, saved all," and questioning him about his origins. Discovering that it is Michael himself, they demand proof, but Michael needs a sword. At this point, they are attacked by demons. The men flee. Laura is again visited by the worm Lucifer, who goes inside her. He speaks to her and convinces her to give birth to the baby he wants, after which she can do what she wants, even kill Liz. The woman calms down and sees herself with the baby in her arms. But one day she frees herself and terribly mutilates the guards and escapes from the ward. When she sees the consequences of her actions, she is horrified. What has been done to her? She manages to make her way to a warehouse, and after locking herself inside, she drinks a canister of chlorine. Liz finds it and promises that soon Lucifer will consume her completely, and then she will find peace. But then Laura suddenly gains unprecedented strength, grabs the hated Liz, and spews the contents of her stomach on her. From Laura's womb, Lucifer himself begins to speak to Liz and demands that the woman be killed as soon as he is born, and to destroy all who knows of what is happening. Laura is imprisoned in a glass sarcophagus to prevent any further attempts to kill the child, and Lucifer returns to the underworld where he sees Michael and taunts him. He offers an alliance that no one will be able to defeat, but the archangel refuses to support the rebel. He thanks Michael for his new home, the body of Jesus himself, which will be his own. Lucifer flies away, and the archangel suddenly realizes this is not at all what he thought. It is not the devil but God who has chosen Laura. She will give birth to Christ, not the devil's vessel. He asks the people to bring his sword, but the demons are close and the sword is heavy. But two men risk their lives to bring the weapon, and Michael is set free. He dispels the demons and promises to return for his saviors. Michael returns to Earth and finds the shroud. Then he goes to Laura's sarcophagus. He is horrified to see her change and tries to tell her that this child is not evil at all. It is he who will defeat the devil. But Laura gets out and throws Michael away. Then she stands over him and tells him that the waters are already breaking. Searing jets pour out on the archangel and he screams in pain. Losing his strength, Laura places Michael in her lap and demands that he kneel. He refuses and the woman sinks her fingers into his neck. With the last of his strength, Michael promises that the devil will not be able to control the child. He is the one who will defeat Lucifer because the blood of Christ does not flow and good is always stronger than evil. Enraged, Laura throws Michael aside and begins to destroy everything around her. But then the birth begins. The devil's followers gather in the castle courtyard while Liz takes the born baby away. Laura is thrown down the well and the monster takes a chain with a sharp tip and goes into the courtyard. Liz brings the baby out and shows it to the assembled people. The end of God's tyranny has come. She orders the people to kneel and calls upon Lucifer to receive the baptism of blood. At the same moment, the monster begins to spin his terrible weapon, crushing everyone in the courtyard. At this time, Michael comes to his senses and goes out into the yard as the doctor kisses the baby and dies under the blows. Liz carries the baby away, and Michael finds Laura, who has managed to hold onto the edge of the well, and pulls her out. The pair catch up with Liz's car, and while Laura picks up her baby, Michael calls him the God who chose his mother. He asks the woman to find the cardinal and goes to the well himself. He seals the entrance to the underworld where all the demons of hell have rushed, but the monster rejects him and opens the gates again. And then Michael detonates the explosives he set earlier. The castle explodes to the great joy of the cardinal. A bit later, the cardinal and Laura with the child in her arms come to the temple and return the shroud. And Michael descends into the underworld and frees the people who believed in him. After a while, Liz observes Cardinal and Laura with a grown boy walking through the woods, and she calls the baby Lucifer. And he turns around and shows a dark jet showing out of his nose. Then he turns away. Pretty unusual film which raises the themes of the struggle between good and evil, but viewed through the prism of the scientific achievements of our time. And some doubts arise as to whether man truly understands what he is really doing.
welcome to the show.
A man is running through a dark forest in Ireland. He seems frightened despite constantly encountering signs with the words "point of no return" and various numbers, indicating either directions or distances to something. However, he fails to escape. Darkness quickly envelops the surroundings, a flock of birds flies overhead, and he falls into a pit. In the next moment, an invisible force grabs him and drags him away. Elsewhere in the country lives an artist named Minna, who works in a pet store. One day, her boss asks her to deliver a rare parrot to a zoo in a neighboring city, and Minna agrees. She takes the bird home for the night. There, she tells the parrot that her mother died 15 years ago. Suddenly, the bird starts to respond. In the evening, Minna puts on a wig and goes to a bar where she introduces herself to a guy with a fictitious name, claiming to be a ballerina. In the morning, Minna apologizes to the parrot for her behavior, saying the real her would probably not be liked. Finally, the pair set off on their journey. On the way, her sister Lucy calls, reminding her that she has family and nieces who love and await her. Minna continues driving and eventually ends up on a road leading into an old dark forest. Unexpectedly, the car breaks down and stalls, and the connection also mysteriously cuts off. Taking the parrot's cage, Minna steps onto the road to seek help, but the forest is dark and empty. When she returns to where she left the car, the road is deserted. Minna continues to wander through the quickly darkening area, talking to the bird to keep herself cheerful and suggesting they name it Darwin. Suddenly, she notices a woman running past and decides to follow her. Minna catches up with her near a small forest cabin, and the woman, opening the door, orders her to come inside quickly if she wants to live. Naturally, Minna rushes into the cabin. The elderly woman is named Madeline. She has been living here for some time with two other young people, Ciara and Daniel. She immediately orders Minna to stand in front of a mirror because the watchers cannot enter inside but observe from outside, coming every night after sunset. Standing by the mirror, Minna suddenly hears sounds like applause. Madeline confirms her suspicions. The watchers are applauding the appearance of a new object. In the morning, Minna announces that she intends to leave. Although the others assure her it's impossible, she heads into the forest. Madeline catches up with her, explaining that the forest causes hallucinations, but it is possible to survive here. The signs scattered throughout the forest mark the boundary from which a person can reach the cabin before dark. But if you go beyond the boundary, there will be no way back. They were made by a man named the Professor. But where he is now, no one knows. That night, Daniel puts on a show for the watchers, presenting them with the newcomer, but they ask her to behave as usual. Meanwhile, Ciara turns on the music and dances, as she does every evening. Minna, on the other hand, finds discs with recordings of Love Search TV shows. In the morning, she and Ciara go to gather medicinal herbs, because her missing husband asked the girl to take care of Daniel. Then the man went to search for a way out and disappeared. Ciara explains that recently they found strange burrows scattered throughout the forest. That's where the watchers go during daylight hours. She believes she has been in the cabin for almost 5 months. Later, Madeline announces the safety rules. Never leave at night, never open the doors for anyone, always try to stay in the light. Strange life begins with entirely identical days. Minna watches endless shows and often stands staring into the mirror. One day she knocks on it, and immediately there is a knock on the door. Madeline orders everyone to freeze and everything stops. The next day she and Daniel go hunting. The boy tells her that Madeline used to work at the university, so she considers herself a know-it-all. But she has been living here the longest. Daniel himself has been in the cabin for 8 months, but has never seen anyone. After listening to the boy, Minna convinces Daniel to help her explore a burrow. Using a rope, Minna descends, explores it, and finds old items, newspapers, toys, pieces of electronics, and an old bicycle, which she ties to the rope and sends up. But then strange sounds, similar to those heard at night outside the cabin walls, echo from the darkness. Minna screams and the rope falls at her feet. Climbing out into the light, Minna leaves the dangerous place, and they calmly examine the items. With the bicycle, it might be possible to escape from here, but Madeline has a rather strange reaction to this. Meanwhile, Daniel manages to assemble a surveillance system from the found pieces of electronics and installs a camera by the door. At night, everything goes as usual. Ciara dances when there is a knock on the door, and Daniel suggests that a person has come. Madeline forbids opening it, but they hear the voice of Ciara's husband. Ciara tries to prove that it is John by asking him what book she is reading, but he does not answer. Although they bought this book together on his advice, the man begs to be saved from death. Ciara asks to look into the camera, but when he leans towards it, something drags him into the forest. Immediately there is a knock on the mirror stronger than ever before. Madeline stands in front of the people, as if shielding them, and the knocking stops. In the morning, Madeline throws the bicycle into the burrow, demanding that they no longer break the rules. Later, Mina recalls her sister and mother, who invited the girls for a car ride. The weather was beautiful and Mina opened the window. Her mother asked her to close it because the wind was bothering her, but Mina didn't listen, mimicking her mother, who got distracted from the road. The tragedy happened, for which Mina still feels guilty. Winter soon arrived. The days grew shorter, the nights colder, and food became increasingly scarce. Quarrels began to flare up among the cabin's inhabitants. One day, Sierra left for the forest. Mina caught up with her, and she confessed that she felt John was real. She runs to the house from where Daniel's screams are heard, angry with Madeline and Mina, refusing to let them inside. The women hide under a tree and soon see lanky, spider-like monsters emerging from the forest, approaching the cabin window, and making terrible shrill noises. The watchers stare at Daniel and Sierra while Mina and Madeline wait for them to leave so they can return to the cabin. When they do, the women rush to the door and beg to be let in. Daniel refuses, and then Mina tells him about her guilt towards her mother. She asks him to understand that he will suffer all his life, realizing that he is responsible for the death of people. The doors open. The four of them immediately stand in front of the mirror, hoping to convince the watchers that they are in place. Madeline admits that she tried to protect them from certain things. She used to teach history and mythology, and unlike them, came here voluntarily. Only here did she realize how dangerous this place was. Once she hunted alone and saw herself at sunset. Not an exact copy, but very similar. The Watchers are an ancient species with many names: changelings, winged ones, fairies. They study people to impersonate them, and they will never let them leave. Knocks and the voices of the cabin's inhabitants are heard outside. Then Daniel finds a hatch in the floor, which they didn't even know existed. Descending, they discover a well-fortified and equipped living space filled with food and equipment. Mina turns on an old computer, and a video recording shows the face of the professor, whose real name was Rory Kilmartin. He was the first to study the Watchers and tried to learn about their origins. In 1979, the scientist found this place, which he called Wonderland. Every evening, the Watchers came to his window and studied him. For many years before this, the professor's colleagues laughed at him, not believing his tales. Then he built this bunker, using the labor of men from nearby remote villages. He chose the lonely or those with bad habits so that their disappearance would not attract much attention, as every evening he convinced them to have dinner outdoors. Hiding inside, he watched the Watchers deal with them. Thus this bunker was built on blood. One day, a Watcher appeared before him in the form of a girl with red hair. She was very different from the others, as if she were unique and looked curious and harmless. That's when he realized that if he unlocked the secrets of the fairies, he might even conquer death. He did the impossible, lured this girl into a cage and began experiments on communication, trying to befriend her. She changed form, sometimes turning into a frightening creature with long arms, but seemed to listen to him. Gradually, she became close and understandable to him, but now the professor realized he had achieved nothing significant and was ready to end his life. He hid a boat by the river, and this is the only way out. Just follow the birds. He asked the survivor to go to his university office and destroy all the documents found there, and now he will go to her and stay here forever. In the last recording, they see Kilmartin climbing up. Gunshots are heard, and then all is quiet. Realizing that this is their last night in the forest, Sierra turns on the music and invites Daniel to dance, but he seems upset about leaving. He says his family is dysfunctional, and he has nowhere to return to. Then the girl offers to let him stay with her for a while until they find him a good occupation and place to live, as they have become good friends. In the morning, the group sets out to escape, guided by the signs and Mina's parrot, whom she asked to lead them. Soon they reach a massive stone disc in the ground, covering the entrance to a huge tunnel. Madeline explains that this is where the last representatives of the ancient fairy race were locked up, who were once very friendly with humans. After many centuries, they managed to surface, but now the friendship has turned into hatred. They stay here because they are held by magic, so they need to run far away. They walk all day. Dusk falls, but there is no river or boat in sight. It starts raining, and they fall into despair when they see huge flocks of birds flying in one direction. They run after them and reach the river. The women rush to the boat when Daniel hears screams behind him and sees John. He returns for him, rejoicing that the man survived, but it turns out to be a changeling. The women scream, begging Daniel to run, but he doesn't hear and dies at the hands of the Watcher, who then takes on his form while Madeline, Mina, and Ciara sail down the river. The women wake up in the boat and see that they have returned to civilization. They stop a bus and ride to the city, listening to music and only now realizing that it's over. Later, Mina goes to the university where Kilmartin worked, posing as his niece to enter his office and fulfill his last request. There, she finds more documents, photos, and a recording in which he discusses the fairies and the fact that there are still half-blood children in the world. Mina finds a stack of photos and, looking at them, seems very surprised. In the evening, Mina goes to Ciara's house, showing a photo of Madeline from the professor's belongings, explaining that it is his wife who died several years ago. So the Madeline they lived with in the cabin was a special fairy capable of moving during the day. It was she whom Kilmartin caught. He couldn't kill her, and she took on Madeline's form to return to civilization. Then a car pulls up to the house, and the real Ciara gets out, while the one she's talking to is actually a fairy. Realizing she has been exposed, the fairy knocks Mina out and changes shape again, turning into Daniel. They just want to live like other species. But due to human hatred, they are forced to stay underground. The fairy turns into Kilmartin and goes to Mina. In the house, the fairy transforms into her and prepares to kill the girl. But Mina says that there are others like her somewhere because she is half human and acknowledges that it was unfair of humans to banish the fairies from their world. The fairy softens and spreads her wings, admitting that Mina might be right, and she flies away. Mina revives Ciara. Later, she reunites with her twin sister Lucy, finally forgiving herself for their mother's death. She tells her about her experience, admitting that she still sees Madeline appearing in the forms of other people. Her nieces arrive to show Mina a drawing of her and Darwin, whom she still keeps as a pet. Meanwhile, outside, a girl with red hair appears, looking at their apartment windows and taking on the form of a girl with a strange face. This is probably not a horror movie, but rather a scary bedtime story when a child doesn't want to sleep and asks for something frightening. Everything builds up slowly and tastefully, but the ending unfolds somewhat mundanely, although mysteriously. After a fight with her fiancé, Michelle packs her things and leaves, placing her engagement ring and the apartment keys on the table. She drives for a long time through the countryside, stopping at a gas station where she notices a car that has been following her for some time. Late at night, her fiancé calls, trying to convince Michelle to return, but she doesn't want to talk and turns on the radio. She hears a news report about widespread power outages. Distracted, she gets into an accident. The car flips over several times, crashing onto the roadside, and Michelle loses consciousness. Sometime later, she wakes up in a concrete room. An IV is connected to her arm, and her leg is bandaged and restrained with metal chains. Her belongings are piled in the corner of the room. Using the IV stand, Michelle reaches her phone, but there's no signal. Then she hears footsteps, and the door opens, revealing a large man who places a tray of food in front of her. She begs him to let her go, promising she won't tell anyone, but the man tells her that he's not letting her die, and after leaving the key to her shackles, he walks out. Michelle frees herself, gets dressed, and sharpens the end of a crutch, preparing to fight for her freedom, but the man is gone, so she sets a piece of clothing on fire and pushes it into the ventilation duct. The fire alarm goes off, and when the man runs in, he injects her with something, causing her to pass out. When she regains consciousness, Michelle sees the man sitting by her bed. He tells her that she's actually very lucky to be there. She must eat and take her medication because humans have been attacked, though it's still unclear what kind of attack it is. They are now in a bunker beneath his farm. He saw her crash and couldn't leave her to die. Michelle insists on calling the police, but the man explains that the outside world is contaminated. It will take at least a year for the air to be breathable again, and that's only if it was a simple attack. If it were something like Martians, humanity might be doomed. Michelle asks to contact her family, but the man assures her that everyone left on the surface is dead. As Michelle tries to process what she's heard, there's a loud noise from the next room. The man leaves, leaving the door open, and shouts at someone, then returns and angrily reminds her that she should be grateful to him for saving her life. Before he leaves, he introduces himself as Howard. The next morning, Michelle is awakened by a sound coming from the surface and sees the door open. She walks out and wakes a young man sleeping in the hallway. He tries to reassure her, but she explains that she doesn't believe Howard's lies. However, Emmett confirms that everything is indeed as Howard said. Later, Howard shows Michelle the bunker. In the center is a communal area where a special system filters the air. There's a library, a TV, and movies on disc. The kitchen is impressive, with an electric stove, fridge, and silverware. The table is a family heirloom. Access to Howard's personal room is forbidden. Michelle has to use the toilet behind a curtain because Howard fears she might try something dangerous again, like nearly starting a fire. Also, water needs to be used sparingly. After the tour, Howard invites her to sit at the table for lunch. Michelle notices a stack of women's magazines, and Howard explains that they belong to Megan, who is no longer with them. Suddenly, Michelle hears a noise outside and guesses it might be a car passing by, but Howard assures her that it's impossible. He's tired of explaining that no one is left above, even though people thought he was crazy when he started building the bunker. He offers Michelle a chance to see for herself, leading her to a staircase. At the top, Michelle sees a door with a small window. The outside world looks unchanged at first glance, but in the pen in front of the house lie dead pigs with deep sores. Howard explains that those were his pigs, which he couldn't save. Then Michelle recognizes his car as the one that had been following her the night of the accident. Howard points out that these doors are always locked and shows her the key. Later, Michelle and Emmett discuss the situation. Emmett reveals that Howard had served in the Navy. Afterward, he bought the farm and hired Emmett to help with the chores. Howard is obsessed with conspiracy theories, which is why he built the bunker. Emmett wasn't kidnapped. He ran to Howard's bunker, hoping to take shelter because he saw Howard pouring all his money into its construction. Michelle reminds Emmett that it was Howard who caused the accident and brought her here, so everything he says about an attack is a lie, but Emmett insists she's wrong. He saw the attack himself, a flash, an explosion, and the horizon turned red. He's glad he made it to the bunker before Howard locked the door. Michelle tries to refute Howard's claims, unaware that he's been standing in the doorway, listening to their conversation. Howard invites them to dinner, remarking that the two seem to have gotten along well. During dinner, Emmett talks about his unfulfilled dreams and then notices a Monopoly game, suggesting they pass the time playing it. Howard gets annoyed by the chatter, and Michelle flirts with Emmett, provoking Howard's outburst of anger. He yells at her, demanding respect because he saved her life. While Howard is scolding them, Michelle manages to steal the keys from his belt. Howard notices her strange behavior and realizes the keys are missing, but before he can react, a noise from above distracts him and Michelle hits him over the head with a bottle, running for the bunker exit. Emmett shouts after her to stop, but Michelle reaches the door and slips into the airlock just before Howard can catch up. Michelle sees a car approaching the farm. She screams, trying to get the driver's attention, but a woman suffering from a severe skin infection runs to the window, desperately begging to be let into the bunker. Howard forbids Michelle from helping the woman, saying it's too late to save her. Realizing that some sort of attack has indeed happened, Michelle returns to the bunker. Later, Howard admits that he caused Michelle's accident, but it was this accident that saved her life. Howard lends her some of Megan's clothes and sends her to shower since she was near the door. He reveals that he recognized the infected woman as his former neighbor. Since most people knew about his bunker, others may come here too. Howard demands that Michelle stitch up the wound she caused and starts telling funny stories from his time in the Navy. Michelle begins stitching up Howard's wound as he continues to share stories, praising her for her efforts. Later, he brings a box containing her belongings from the car and asks her about her life. Michelle admits that she had dreamed of becoming a fashion designer. Howard in turn shares that his daughter Megan had wanted to be an artist. He shows Michelle a picture of Megan, a young girl, and laments that after his divorce, Megan's mother turned her against him and took her to Chicago. Howard expresses frustration that people don't care about their safety, but at least he tried to protect them. Later, Emmett comforts Michelle, telling her she couldn't have saved the woman outside even if they had let her in, she would have died anyway. They reminisce about their past lives. Emmett, who had been awarded a scholarship to a polytechnic school, admits he got scared and never left for it. Michelle, meanwhile, reveals how her father used to beat her, leaving her terrified of confrontation throughout her life. Emmett reminds her that, despite everything, they're the lucky ones. They survived. Over the next few days, the three of them begin to coexist somewhat peacefully. They play games, prepare meals together, and make small attempts to adjust to their new lives. One day, a loud noise echoes from above. Howard suggests that, if it's the military, it's not Earth's military. The flashes they saw earlier were just the first phase. Now, the second phase, clearing out the territories, has begun, likely by alien forces. Suddenly, the air filtration system fails. Howard asks Michelle to climb through the ventilation shaft to restart the system, as she's the only one small enough to fit. She agrees and begins crawling through the ducts. Eventually, she reaches the filtration unit and manages to restart it. But while she's there, she spots something disturbing. a message etched into the glass that reads, "Help," along with a bloody earring lying beneath a ladder. The earring looks exactly like the one Megan was wearing in the photo Howard showed her. Shaken, Michelle tells Emmett about her discovery, suspecting that Howard might have done something to Megan. Upon closer inspection, Emmett recognizes the girl in the photo, not as Megan, but as Brittany, a classmate of his sister who went missing years ago. A second photograph falls from the book, showing Howard and Brittany dressed in the same clothes that Michelle now wears, standing together in the bunker. Realizing the danger they're in, Michelle and Emmett decide to plan an escape. They quietly start gathering materials. Michelle cuts a makeshift biohazard suit from a shower curtain, and Emmett constructs a homemade gas mask. Their plan is to take Howard's gun, tie him up, and then one of them will go for help. One evening, while playing a game of charades, they almost give themselves away when Howard starts suspecting that something is off. A few days later, Howard calls them into a room and shows them a barrel of hydrochloric acid, which he claims is for waste disposal. He then accuses them of plotting against him, revealing the tools they had hidden for their escape. Furious, Howard dissolves the tools in the acid as Michelle and Emmett look on, horrified. Trying to protect Michelle, Emmett takes the blame for the attempted escape, admitting that he used the tools to try and make a weapon. Howard, seemingly accepting Emmett's apology, coldly shoots and kills him. Shocked and heartbroken, Michelle watches as Howard calmly reassures her, promising that no one will ever harm her again. He begins taking care of her, offering her ice cream and talking about how they'll create a happy life together in the bunker. Determined to escape, Michelle rushes to finish her biohazard suit while mourning Emmett. But one night, Howard discovers the suit hidden among her belongings. Michelle manages to slip past him, but Howard catches up, scolding her for her ingratitude. In a desperate move, Michelle knocks over the barrel of acid onto Howard, causing a fire to break out in the bunker. She grabs her biohazard suit as a severely injured Howard tries to attack her, but she traps him under a heavy shelf and makes her way to the exit. By now, the bunker is engulfed in flames. With the fire spreading, Michelle crawls through the ventilation shaft, dodging Howard's attempts to stab her through the vent grates. She reaches the air filtration room and quickly dons her biohazard suit. Using a can of nitrogen, she freezes and breaks the lock on the outer door, finally escaping the bunker. Outside, Michelle heads toward a car, but tears her suit in the process. Panicking, she seals the rip with duct tape she finds in the vehicle. Just as she's about to relax, she notices a flock of birds flying freely overhead. Realizing that the air isn't toxic, Michelle removes her gas mask, but before she can celebrate, she spots an alien spaceship hovering in the distance, behaving almost like a living creature. As Michelle watches in horror, the bunker explodes behind her, drawing the attention of the alien ship. She frantically searches for the car keys, but can't find them. She runs to the car, the woman who had tried to get into the bunker earlier, but the car alarm goes off, alerting the alien. Terrified, Michelle hides in a nearby shed, where she finds the corpse of the infected woman. Searching the body, Michelle locates the car keys just as the alien creature begins investigating the shed, trying to force its way through the animal door. Taking advantage of the alien's distraction, Michelle sprints toward Howard's house, but as she reaches it, the alien ship flies overhead, releasing a poisonous gas. Michelle quickly puts on her gas mask and survives the chemical attack. She hides in the car, but the alien begins probing the vehicle, testing its defenses. When it becomes clear that the car is too difficult to breach, the alien ship lifts the vehicle into the air. Inside the car, Michelle finds a bottle of flammable liquid and a lighter. She quickly makes a Molotov cocktail and throws it into the alien ship's mouth-like opening. The resulting explosion destroys the alien, and the car crashes to the ground. Michelle survives the fall, climbs out of the wrecked vehicle, and drives away in the woman's car. While driving, she tunes the radio and hears news reports of humanity's victories over the alien invaders. There are instructions for survivors to evacuate and a call for those with medical training or combat experience to head to Houston. As Michelle stops to listen to the full message, she notices a sign pointing toward Houston. She drives in that direction, determined to help, and as lightning flashes, she glimpses an even larger alien ship looming in the sky. The film may not be a masterpiece, but the team's skillful execution is undeniable. The script draws you in gradually, raising unsettling questions about who can truly be trusted.